Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. Joining me today is Markus, co-founder and managing partner at Texterous, an AI services firm that builds customized LLM solutions from enterprise search and RAG systems to agentic workflows across all sorts of industries. Markus, it's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Of course. Well, I want to start at the beginning. What were you doing before Texterous, and what got you the idea for starting this business?
So for my personal backstory, what I did before is I was working for Adobe, basically working with document processing. So basically helping companies adopt solutions like, for example, Adobe Sign to just make document processes easier, and also partly working with Adobe Substance. So some parts of the Adobe Creative Suite as well, but primarily focused on document processing. And before that, I did management science at UCL, which is basically a degree which combines management with data science, and even all of the management aspects always have this data science lens. And back there already, I had one professor in data science who, really started to get me interested in data science. And I spent a lot of time, even outside of class, learning more about it. Back then, it wasn't really that much about AI yet. However, I did actually write one report during university on the use of AI in the media industry. And there were already back then quite a lot of applications. And during my time at Adobe, already at university, I was talking with friends of mine who were playing around with some AI models. And they said, hey, there's this new startup now. They have now early research access, so you can apply to get early research access to the APIs that they provide. You should apply to this as well. So I applied as well, and they even applied a bit earlier than me. And that startup that was OpenAI. Back then, they were not that famous yet. And it was really a bare bones Microsoft form that you filled out and just kind of explained what you want to research. And so two of my friends, they were actually among the first 6,000 people worldwide that got access to the research preview back then of, I believe that was GPT-3 at the time. And we started playing around with it, and we were really impressed with what you can do with it. Even though that was before the chat optimized models, where you only had completion. So you put in text and it would complete that text, and it still had a lot of issues, but you could kind of feel where the journey would go. And as a side note, we actually wrote one of the first AI generated books at some point as like an early experiment, which we actually even published. But yeah, like from the start, we were fascinated with what's possible and started to think about how you can apply this technology in practice in a business context. And one of the co-founders of Texterous, he actually also has another startup called Digicast, where he got an early experience of applying this in business in customs declarations, actually. And we were excited to see that this works in a real business scenario. And we then thought about how we can make this available to other companies or just generally more users. And initially what we built is a platform, a SaaS platform, primarily geared towards consumers that would be able to build custom tools quite easily on that platform based on language models. Later on, we wanted to scale this and test it on a bigger audience. And for that, we knew we would need some sort of funding to actually promote it on a larger scale. But none of us really had experience with venture backing, and also not with grants, and all of that also would have taken quite some time. But also simultaneously, that was around the time when ChatGPT actually came out. And suddenly everyone was excited about AI, which for us was actually somewhat surprising, because from a technological perspective, nothing really changed that much from the completion models to then chat optimized interfaces. But also already at the time, we were organizing events together with universities, for example, the Technical University in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And then companies started to come up to us after these events and say, well, what you're doing here is quite interesting. We want to do something with AI now as well. Can you help us? Can you build something for us? So we started doing that initially kind of to cross-finance the platform we were building. But then that ended up working so well that that actually became our main business model. And that's what we do to this day, that we build custom software solutions. And now we're more and more moving towards strategic consulting and advising on how you can best build this, and also help companies build internal AI teams to build themselves.
Amazing. Love that story. Thanks for sharing. And must be pretty, I don't know, fascinating to be one of the early users, not just from like getting to see the product early, but then, like you mentioned, you guys were thinking about how do we spread awareness, and then, there's just like this, global phenomena that everyone, gets exposure to, the new version, and everyone's on ChatGPT all of a sudden. So that must have been pretty interesting to be a part of. When it came to like your first interaction with that like research preview, do you remember any of the early use cases? You mentioned the book, but it sounded like maybe that wasn't the first thing you did. Like, what are the first things you asked it or you tried to, get completed? Do you remember any of that?
Oh man, it's a very long time ago. So we got access in like 2020. There was 2.5 years before even ChatGPT came out. Yeah, like very early use case. I think like we just started experimenting with random things. I don't know, like starting to write some random sentences and see what it would complete. Emails. Actually, two of the other co-founders from Texterous, they wrote a research paper very early, but also quite simple research paper on how you can use this in a business context to automate some types of emails, for example, customer service. Yeah, but back then you were still quite limited. The quality was not that great. The context windows were really small. You could barely get a full page. And there was also an issue we had, because we had this idea, okay, well, you can generate so much text now. It would be cool to have a book, but back then it would have been impossible to generate an entire book and have it be coherent, and would just drift off. And just also sentences themselves didn't really make sense. You would have some really weird sentences where it would just stop in the middle of the sentence and so on. But then what actually made the book idea work is that we just played around and asked it questions. So we like one of those early examples of what we did that I do remember quite well is we had a kind of philosophical discussion on art and what the definition is of art, and whether it's subjective or objective. And we had one guy in the group who was quite convinced that in some cases art is actually objective, or there is some sort of objective standard, especially in the fine arts, let's say. And we discussed it for a while, and then we thought, well, let's just ask this model what it says. Yeah, and then we tried to have it speak from the perspective of different historical people. And then as a third step, we were like, okay, let's have a philosopher ask them. And who better to take for that than Socrates, who's well known for asking people questions until they don't even understand the world anymore. And yeah, that actually led to some really interesting results. And then that's how the idea was born, to just like take a lot of these short stories and put them into one book.
Amazing. Love that. Well, I could ask questions about the founding journey for a long time, but I want to also get to like your business today. You mentioned that you kind of pivoted from a SaaS to realizing, oh, there's a lot of demand for, just our service itself. Tell me a bit more about like, what are the types of customers that you guys work with? How large are the companies? Where are they based? What industries? Any trends you're seeing in the type of businesses that are adopting AI?
So in general, we're industry agnostic, so we work with all types of industries. And what we've also seen is that a lot of the challenges and the general architecture of the tools that those companies want to build are quite similar and don't really depend that much on the specific industry that they're in. In terms of like locations and sizes, we've worked also with a lot of different companies there. Location-wise, we're primarily focused on Europe, and within Europe, most of our clients have been from Austria and the Netherlands, simply because also our founding team is primarily based there and from there, so we already had contacts there. In terms of company sizes, we've worked with startups, we've worked with SMEs, but we've also worked with massive international companies, so the range there is really quite big as well. What sort of trends have I seen? So just for us as a company, we're seeing more and more demand from the healthcare sector, actually. But I'm not sure if that's a general trend or if that's just because we've had a few projects there now and the companies are starting to get to know us.
Amazing. Yeah. It's really interesting to see like how different, I mean, again, for you, it's probably so different from 2020 when you first interacted with the model till now. But even for us, we started Voker about a year ago, and sure, a lot of people knew about ChatGPT, but businesses still were like, there was like no way healthcare was going to touch, anything LLM related. And, certain businesses, we'd have intro calls and we need to like explain what this thing even is and what it can do. And in a year, people have really learned. I feel like this is one of the fastest technological waves in terms of, like the fact that healthcare is now talking to you guys, a couple years into this being public, being a public tool is pretty fast for that industry, I would think. What are the kind of use cases you're seeing across all the industries you work with?
Well, a lot of the use cases tend to be things that can be solved by some type of RAG implementation, so retrieval augmented generation. A lot of the use cases are just support with finding relevant information and then based on that information generating new insights. But in some cases, it's just even enough just to help them find what they're looking for. That is sometimes actually already a big problem. But if you can then combine that with generation of new documents that you might need in that specific instance, that's even more helpful. So yeah, quite a lot of use cases fall within that. But also now what I think is going to become bigger, especially next year, is just general awareness and organizational learning and the competence building within organizations, just also to be ready for the future, first of all. But secondly, especially for companies either based in the EU or selling to EU clients, is that they're now already required under the EU AI Act to train their employees on AI use. And if they're in higher risk categories, then they will even have to like fulfill other requirements. But this requirement for AI training is already in force now. It's just that until August 2026, it's not enforced yet, and there's no penalties yet. But after that, the penalties are very steep. They can range to up to 7% of global revenue. So that's quite hurtful if you don't comply with that.
That's really interesting. I wasn't even aware of that, classic, US bubble, but I love that the EU is actually moving quickly and thinking ahead of, hey, where are these things going to go? Okay, instead of just saying, oh, this is going to replace everyone's job or something like that, which is kind of, I think, a little bit of a doomsday sort of scenario. Instead, it's like, let's teach people about it so they can take advantage of the tools. And it sounds like you guys help organizations do that, which is awesome. Yeah. You mentioned RAG. What, do you have a specific state-of-the-art, suggestion on how to do RAG, or is it different for every use case?
Well, there's a lot of little things that you can do to improve the performance, but a lot of those things, for a lot of them, there's not like a general recommendation. It depends sometimes, like on the data that you have, on the use case that you're trying to solve. But also, me personally, I can't really go that much in depth from a technical perspective. Although I do also have a little bit of a technical background. My co-founders are much deeper on that, so they can probably give you better insights there.
I guess at a high level, I'm just curious, do you find that like, you said, hey, there's a lot of tips and tricks, but it's not generally applicable. You kind of need to start. It sounds like you need to start building the thing, see how it does, and then iterate. Is that right? What does that workflow look like normally with your customers? Is it, hey, you guys have great expertise, so you're bringing like, this is our best idea of a V1, and then we see the results, and then we're going to add these tweaks, based on our previous experience, or how does that play out?
So basically, we offer three things right now. Number one is what we call a CIO as a service, which is where like you actually have someone or even multiple people go into your company, like actually physically come into your office, work with the people there, and are there, 5 days a week, and just really understanding the company and then helping build up internal competencies, building up internal AI teams, and just being, like head of AI, essentially like the chief AI officer within the company. And that's like the most intense thing that you can do. If you just want to build something and like test something, then it's very similar to what you actually mentioned. It's very iterative. So we work in development sprints there. We usually start with, let's say, a sprint 0, which is we're not necessarily building something there yet, but we're really taking the time to understand the problem and to understand the process within the company. Because I think that's often the problem, that people rush too quickly into the implementation without really deeply understanding the problem beforehand. So we spent the time there, and then every sprint afterwards, we iterate. So we start off with like a mock-up or like a proof of concept. We move to an MVP, and then progress sprint by sprint until we're at a point where the customer says they're happy, or potentially we just keep iterating and then just work on new things that they want to work on. And those sprints are like typically 1 month, and then we meet in between and discuss where we want to go from there. And that works really well. We're also completely flexible, so after each sprint, you can decide if and how you want to continue. And that is something that we've also been told that they really appreciate, to have that flexibility. And then the third thing is, like just to kind of get your feet wet with AI, let's say, which is just basic workshops and employee training, which can either be a first entry point, but can also be, let's say, an add-on to one of the two other services, either during the project or afterwards, to actually make sure that the people within the organization understand the new tools that you've just spent a lot of time and money to develop, and that they're actually being implemented. Because you always have to remember the human element as well, and convincing people and showing them the value of those tools.
Amazing. It sounds like, you guys take a very custom, very tailored approach. You learn the company, you get in there literally physically, and then you help, in kind of bite-sized chunks of sprints, etc., to, start with, a V0, move to a V1, and kind of work with the customer to figure out like what great looks like. So sounds like a really custom approach, which is super helpful for businesses that don't really know what they're doing in this new world of AI. So great service you guys are offering. Well, yeah, I've really enjoyed learning more about Texterous. I want to throw your website up on the screen here, texterous.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then great. And then where's a good place for people to follow along with Texterous, follow you on socials, etc.?
Like the main platform where we post stuff is on LinkedIn. Although to be fair, we haven't really posted that much yet, but that is something we do want to improve and share a bit more. People can also just check out the website. We have a little bit of information there. And if you do want to work with us, then you can just press on the get started thing there at the top, and you can book basically an appointment with one of us, and we'll figure out how we can best help you.
Amazing. Well, Markus, it's been great learning about your business and your experience in the AI space. Thanks for coming on Built the Ship, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the invite again. And have a great rest of the day.
Amazing. Bye now.
Bye.